The stagecoach lurched violently as the wheel struck a gopher hole on the dusty Oklahoma road, and Faith Sullivan felt herself sailing through the open door before her mind could even register what was happening. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions around Kingfisher, Oklahoma, in the summer of 1883, a landscape of golden grass and unforgiving sun. Faith had been leaning slightly out the door, trying to catch a breath of cooler air during the sweltering afternoon journey from Kansas, when the sudden impact sent the entire coach tilting sideways. Her fingers lost their grip on the leather strap, and gravity claimed her with cruel efficiency. She hit the ground hard, shoulder first, then rolled twice across the packed dirt of the trail. The breath exploded from her lungs in a painful gasp. Through the cloud of dust surrounding her, she could hear shouting and the terrified screams of the horses as they bolted, spooked by the violent jolt and the weight distribution suddenly shifting. The driver had lost the reins. Faith pushed herself up on her elbows, dizzy and disoriented, watching in horror as the stagecoach careened down the road with 4 panicked horses pulling it faster and faster. The driver was clinging to his seat, reaching desperately for the leather lines that now dragged uselessly in the dirt beneath the animal's hooves. Her carpetbag had tumbled out with her, spilling her few possessions across the trail. Blood trickled from a scrape on her cheekbone, and her blue traveling dress was covered in dust and torn at the shoulder. She tried to stand, but her left ankle protested sharply, sending a spike of pain up her leg that made her gasp. Then she heard the thunder of hooves approaching from behind. A rider appeared through the dust cloud, moving faster than seemed possible. The man sat his horse with the easy confidence of someone born in the saddle, his body moving as one with the powerful bay stallion beneath him. He wore worn leather chaps over denim pants, a dust-colored shirt, and a black hat pulled low against the glare of the sun. His face was shadowed, but Faith could see the intense concentration in his features as he urged his horse forward. He was chasing the runaway stagecoach. Faith watched, frozen despite her pain, as the rider closed the distance with remarkable speed. His horse stretched out in a full gallop, eating up the ground between them and the fleeing stagecoach. The man leaned forward in the saddle, reaching for his rope, and Faith realized what he intended to do. It was impossible. The horses were running blind with terror now, the coach swaying dangerously behind them. Any moment it could flip and kill the driver, or the horses could run until they dropped dead from exhaustion and fear. But the cowboy seemed undaunted by impossibility. He drew alongside the lead horses, matching their frantic pace. His rope spun once, twice, then flew through the air with perfect precision. The loop settled over the head of the lead horse on the left side, and immediately he began to pull, turning his own horse gradually to the side, using his mount's weight and strength to guide the terrified team. It was the most skillful piece of horsemanship Faith had ever witnessed. Slowly, impossibly, the panicked animals began to respond. The cowboy was talking to them, she realized, his voice carrying across the distance in a low, steady stream of calm words that somehow penetrated their terror. His hands worked the rope with subtle adjustments, never jerking, never forcing, just persistent gentle pressure that told the horses which direction to go. The team began to slow. The wild gallop became a canter, then a rough trot, and finally, blessedly, they stopped. The stagecoach rolled to a halt in a final cloud of dust, tilted but upright. The driver was slumped over his bench, breathing hard, his face pale beneath his weathered tan. The cowboy swung down from his horse and went immediately to the team, moving from animal to animal, running his hands down their legs, checking for injuries, speaking in those same quiet tones that had calmed them before. Only when he was satisfied that the horses were unharmed did he look back down the trail to where Faith still sat in the dirt. He strode toward her with long, purposeful steps, and as he came closer, Faith got her first clear look at him. He was young, perhaps 25, with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of creek water, greenish-brown with flecks of gold. His face was strong-featured, with a straight nose and a firm mouth set in an expression of concern. Dark hair curled slightly where it touched his collar, and several days' worth of stubble shadowed his jaw. "Miss, are you hurt?" His voice was deeper than she had expected, rough-edged but gentle, with the slight drawl of someone who had spent their life in Oklahoma territory. "I think my ankle," Faith managed, her own voice shaking slightly. The shock was catching up with her now, making her hands tremble. He knelt in the dust beside her without hesitation, his hands hovering uncertainly. "May I take a look?" She nodded, and he carefully lifted the hem of her skirt just enough to examine her booted ankle. His touch was surprisingly gentle for such work-roughened hands. He probed carefully, watching her face for signs of pain. "Does not feel broken," he said after a moment. "Likely just a bad sprain." "You took quite a fall. Hit your head at all?" "I do not think so. My shoulder and my cheek mostly." He produced a surprisingly clean handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed carefully at the scrape on her face. "You are lucky you did not break your neck. What happened?" "The wheel hit something, I think. I was leaning out for air and just flew right out the door when we lurched." The driver had recovered enough to climb down from his perch, and he approached with an apologetic expression. "Miss Sullivan, I am terribly sorry. Are you badly hurt?" "She will be all right, I think," the cowboy answered before Faith could respond. "But she needs proper tending." "How far to town?" "About 3 miles to Kingfisher," the driver said. "But I need to check the coach and the team before we can go anywhere." "That was some fine riding, mister." "You saved our lives, I reckon." The cowboy dismissed the praise with a slight shake of his head. "Just happened to be riding this way. Your team needs to rest before you push them any further. They are good horses, but they have had a bad scare." "What is your name?" Faith asked suddenly. He had saved them all, and she did not even know what to call him. He looked at her, and something flickered in those unusual eyes. Up close, she could see the genuine concern there and something else too, a kind of intensity that made her breath catch despite the pain she was in. "Garrett Cooper, miss. I have a ranch about 2 miles north of here. Faith Sullivan. I was traveling to Kingfisher to take up a teaching position at the school. Were you now?" Something that might have been approval crossed his face. "The town has been needing a proper teacher for a while now." The driver was examining the coach, muttering about the damage to the wheel housing. One of the doors hung at an odd angle, and several boards had cracked in the wild ride. Garrett stood and walked over to inspect the damage himself. Faith watched him move, noting the unconscious confidence in every motion. He examined the coach with the same careful attention he had given the horses, running his hands over the wood, testing the wheels. "This is not going to make it to town with a passenger load," he said finally. "The axle is cracked. You push it and the wheel will come clean off." The driver swore softly. "I will have to ride one of the team horses to town and bring back help, but that leaves Miss Sullivan here alone." "No," Garrett said immediately. "I will take her to my ranch. It is much closer and my mother can tend to her properly. You can send word when you reach town so folks know she is safe." Faith opened her mouth to protest, but Garrett was already walking back to her. "Can you stand?" "I think so." He offered his hand and she took it, using his strength to pull herself upright. The moment she put weight on her left ankle, pain shot through it sharply enough to make her gasp. She would have fallen if Garrett had not caught her, his arm going around her waist to steady her. "That settles it," he said firmly. "You are not walking anywhere." Before she could object, he bent and scooped her up in his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing at all. Faith let out a startled sound, her arms instinctively going around his neck. "Mr. Cooper, I cannot possibly—" "You can and you will," he interrupted, but his tone was kind. "You need that ankle elevated and wrapped, and you need someone to make sure you do not have any injuries we cannot see yet. My mother is better than most doctors I have met, and our place is close. We will have you comfortable in no time." He carried her to his horse, which stood patiently ground-tied where he had left it. The animal was a magnificent bay stallion, at least 16 hands high, with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor despite the excitement moments before. "This is Ranger," Garrett said. "He is steady as they come. I am going to lift you up first, then mount behind you. Just hold onto the saddle horn." It took some maneuvering, but soon Faith found herself situated sideways across the saddle, with Garrett mounted behind her, one arm securely around her waist. She was acutely aware of the solid warmth of his chest against her side, the strength in the arm that held her safe. "Your bag, miss," the driver called, hurrying over with her carpet bag. Garrett took it and tied it to his saddle with practiced efficiency. "I will send my ranch hand back with a wagon to help you," Garrett told the driver. "He should be here within the hour." "Much obliged, Mr. Cooper." "And Miss Sullivan, again, my deepest apologies." "It was not your fault," Faith assured him, though speaking was becoming more difficult. The shock and pain were making her feel strange, disconnected. Garrett must have noticed because he held her a little tighter. "We need to go. Hold on." He urged Ranger into a smooth walk, turning off the main road onto a smaller track that led north across the prairie. The horse's gait was remarkably even, but each step still sent small jolts of pain through Faith's ankle. She tried not to make any sound, but Garrett noticed her flinching. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "I am keeping him as steady as I can. It is not your fault. You have been nothing but kind." They rode in silence for a few minutes, and Faith found herself studying what she could see of his face from her position. He had a strong profile, and there was something reassuring about the calm competence he radiated. Most men would have been showing off after such a display of skill with the horses, but Garrett seemed to think nothing of what he had done. "That was remarkable," she said finally. "What you did with the runaway team, I have never seen anything like it." He shrugged slightly, the movement shifting her against his chest. "My father taught me. He always said a good horseman never fights the horse, just shows them there is a better way. Those animals were terrified. They just needed someone to remind them they did not have to be. Your father sounds like a wise man." Something shifted in his expression, a brief shadow of grief. "He was. He passed 2 years ago. Pneumonia took him one winter, came on fast and hard. I am so sorry." "Thank you." "My mother took it hard, but she is strong. We have kept the ranch going, her and me, in our hands. It is a good place. You will see." They crested a low rise, and Faith caught her first glimpse of the Cooper ranch spread out in a shallow valley below. It was larger than she had expected, with a sturdy 2-story ranch house painted white, a big barn and several outbuildings, and extensive corrals where horses grazed peacefully. Trees had been planted around the house, providing precious shade, and she could see a vegetable garden flourishing behind a neat fence. "It is beautiful," she said honestly. "My mother loves this place," Garrett said, and she could hear the affection in his voice. "She came here as a bride 26 years ago when there was nothing but prairie and dreams. She has put her heart into every inch of this land." As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the sun. She was tall and slender, with graying brown hair pulled back in a practical bun, wearing a simple calico dress and an apron. The moment she spotted them, her posture changed to alert concern. "Garrett, what has happened? We have a guest, Ma. This is Miss Faith Sullivan." There was an accident with the stagecoach. Garrett's mother hurried forward as he reined in Ranger near the porch. "Oh, you poor dear. Garrett, get her inside immediately. Is she badly hurt?" Sprained ankle, some scrapes, took a hard fall. She got thrown from the stage when the horses bolted. "And you caught them, I suppose," his mother said, but there was pride beneath the exasperation in her tone. "Bring her to the spare room. I will fetch my medical supplies." Garrett dismounted carefully, then lifted Faith down with the same easy strength as before. This time he carried her right into the house and through a neat parlor to a small bedroom that clearly served as a guest room. The bed was made with a colorful quilt, and lace curtains filtered the bright sunlight to a gentler glow. He set her down on the bed with surprising gentleness, then stepped back, suddenly seeming uncertain. "Ma will take good care of you. I should go send Samuel back to help the driver." "Thank you," Faith said, meaning it more than those simple words could convey. "For everything." Their eyes met, and again Faith felt that strange flutter in her chest. There was something in the way he looked at her, as if he was truly seeing her, not just helping an injured stranger out of obligation. "Rest," he said simply, then turned and left. His mother appeared moments later with a basket of supplies and a no-nonsense expression that somehow managed to be comforting. "Now then, let us see what we are dealing with. I am Garrett Cooper, by the way, though everyone calls me Kate. Welcome to our home, though I wish it were under better circumstances." Over the next hour, Kate proved to be as capable as her son had promised. She helped Faith out of her torn dress and into a borrowed nightgown, then carefully examined her injuries. The ankle was indeed badly sprained and already swelling impressively. Kate wrapped it with practiced efficiency, then cleaned and treated the scrapes on Faith's face and shoulder. "You are lucky," Kate said as she worked. "These are painful but not serious. The ankle will need to stay elevated for several days at least. You will not be teaching school right away, I am afraid." "Oh no," Faith said, distress coloring her voice. "I am supposed to start next week. They are expecting me." "Well, they will just have to wait a bit. You cannot stand on this ankle, let alone manage a classroom full of children. I will have Garrett ride into town tomorrow and explain the situation." Kate's expression softened. "Do not worry, dear. These things have a way of working out. For now, you need to rest and heal." She brought Faith a cup of herbal tea that tasted faintly of mint and something else Faith could not identify. "Drink this. It will help with the pain and help you sleep. You have had quite a shock to your system." Faith sipped the tea obediently, finding it soothing despite the unfamiliar taste. "You have both been so kind. I feel terrible imposing on you like this." "Nonsense. We could hardly leave you sitting in the dirt, could we? Besides, it has been too long since we had another woman in this house. I love my son dearly, but male conversation can be rather limited." Kate smiled warmly. "Tell me about yourself, dear. What brings a young woman like you all the way to Kingfisher to teach?" As the afternoon shadows lengthened, Faith found herself talking more freely than she had in months. She told Kate about growing up in Missouri, about her father's death when she was 16 and her mother's passing just last year, about how she had trained as a teacher and worked in a small school in Kansas, but wanted a fresh start, a place where she could make a real difference. Kate listened with genuine interest, asking questions, sharing stories of her own life on the ranch. She talked about Garrett, and Faith could hear the deep love and pride in every word. How he had taken over the ranch operations after his father's death, how hard he worked, how good he was with the horses. He has a gift, Kate said. Always has, even as a boy. Animals trust him, people too, if they have any sense. He is a good man, my Garrett, though I suppose every mother says that about her son. He saved all our lives today, Faith said softly. That runaway team could have killed the driver, or the horses could have run off a cliff or anything. But he just rode after them like it was nothing and brought them to a stop. It was incredible. Kate studied her with eyes that saw perhaps more than Faith intended to reveal. He is good at what he does, she agreed. Now you should sleep. That tea will be taking effect soon, and rest is the best medicine. She was right. Faith could already feel drowsiness pulling at her, making her eyelids heavy. She barely managed to thank Kate again before sleep claimed her. She woke once in the darkness of night, confused about where she was until memory returned. Her ankle throbbed dully, but whatever Kate had given her was keeping the worst of the pain at bay. She could hear the quiet sounds of the house at night, the creak of wood settling, the distant call of a coyote somewhere on the prairie, and voices, low and quiet, from somewhere in the house. She could not make out the words, but she recognized the deeper rumble as Garrett's voice and the softer tones as his mother's. They seemed to be having an intense discussion about something, though nothing about their tones suggested anger. Faith closed her eyes again and drifted back into sleep, her last conscious thought being that she felt safer here, in this house with these kind strangers, than she had felt in a very long time. Morning arrived with birdsong and the golden light of sunrise streaming through the lace curtains. Faith woke slowly, taking stock of her injuries. Her ankle was stiff and swollen, throbbing with a deep ache when she tried to move it. The scrapes on her face and shoulder stung, but they were minor discomforts compared to the ankle. A soft knock on the door preceded Kate's entry. "Good morning, dear. How are you feeling?" "Sore," Faith admitted, "but better than I expected." "Good. I brought you some willow bark tea for the pain and breakfast. Do you think you can sit up?" With Kate's help, Faith managed to prop herself up against the pillows. Kate had brought a tray with scrambled eggs, biscuits with butter and jam, and the promised tea. The food smelled wonderful, and Faith realized she had not eaten since noon the previous day. "Garrett has already ridden to town," Kate said as Faith ate. "He left before dawn. He will explain things at the school and let them know you are safe. I expect he will bring back the doctor too, though I told him it was not necessary. Men always think doctors know more than women about healing." Faith smiled at that. "You certainly knew what you were doing." "This wrapping on my ankle is better than any doctor I have had. I have had plenty of practice, living out here. You learn to manage most things yourself when the nearest doctor is hours away." Kate settled into a chair by the window. "I also sent a note to Reverend Matthews and his wife. Sarah Matthews runs a ladies' circle in town, and she will make sure word gets around that you are here properly chaperoned. Would not want anyone thinking anything improper." Faith felt her cheeks warm. She had been so focused on her pain and gratitude that she had not even thought about the impropriety of staying unchaperoned at her ranch with a single man. But Kate's presence and her thoughtfulness in sending word to the town's religious leaders solved that problem neatly. "Thank you," Faith said. "I had not even thought of that." "Well, I did. I know how people talk, especially in a small town. This way everything is proper and above board," Kate smiled. "Besides, Sarah will be delighted. She has been trying to find a wife for Garrett for 2 years now, and every single woman for 50 miles has paraded through our church. She will be thrilled to have someone new to throw at him." "Oh, I did not come here looking for, that is." Faith stammered, feeling her face grow even hotter. Kate laughed, a warm and genuine sound. "Relax, dear. I am just teasing. Though I will say I saw how my son looked at you yesterday. He was quite concerned about your welfare." "He is just kind," Faith said quickly, though her heart had started beating faster. Was all Kate said, but her eyes twinkled with amusement. They spent the morning companionably, with Kate checking Faith's injuries periodically and bringing her books to read. The spare room had a small bookshelf, and Faith was pleased to discover a collection that ranged from practical farming guides to novels and poetry. "My late husband loved to read," Kate explained. "He always said a mind needs exercise just as much as a body does. Garrett is the same way. You will find books all over this house." It was early afternoon when they heard the sound of a wagon approaching. Kate went to the window. "That is Garrett returning, and he has brought Dr. Harrison. And Sarah Matthews, it looks like. I should have known she would not wait for an invitation." Within minutes, the house was full of people. Dr. Harrison was a portly man with kind eyes and gentle hands who examined Faith's ankle thoroughly before declaring that Kate had done an excellent job with the treatment. "Keep it elevated and wrapped for at least a week," he instructed. "Then start putting a little weight on it, but slowly. You are young and healthy, so it should heal well, but do not rush it or you will do permanent damage." Sarah Matthews was a plump, cheerful woman in her 40s who swept into the room with the energy of a summer storm. "Oh, you poor dear. What a terrible introduction to our town. But you are in the best hands possible with Kate. Now, do not you worry about a thing. The school board has been notified, and we have arranged for the opening of school to be delayed 2 weeks. That should give you time to heal and get settled properly." "That is very kind," Faith said, feeling overwhelmed by all the attention. Garrett appeared in the doorway, his hat in his hands. "Miss Sullivan, I am glad to see you looking better. I stopped by the stage office and retrieved the rest of your luggage. It is in the parlor." "Thank you, Mr. Cooper. You have gone to so much trouble." "No trouble at all." His eyes met hers, and there was that intensity again, that sense of connection that made her breath catch, Sarah noticed, because Sarah Matthews noticed everything. Her eyes darted between them with barely concealed delight. "Garrett, you are a hero. Everyone in town is talking about how you stopped those runaway horses. Why, the driver says you saved his life and Miss Sullivan's." Garrett looked uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what anyone would do." "That is not true at all, and you know it," his mother said firmly. "Most men would not have had the skill or the courage to do what you did. Accept the compliment, son." He shrugged, clearly wanting to change the subject. "Ma, I should get back to work. The horses need exercise, and I need to check the fence line in the south pasture." "Of course, dear. Sarah, would you like some coffee?" As the women settled into conversation, Garrett escaped, and Faith found herself strangely disappointed by his departure. She tried to focus on what Sarah was saying about the town, about the school and the students she would be teaching. But part of her mind kept drifting back to those creek water eyes and strong, gentle hands. Over the next few days, Faith settled into a strange but comfortable routine at the Cooper Ranch. Her ankle was healing, though slowly, and Kate kept her supplied with willow bark tea and exercises to keep the joint from stiffening. She helped Kate with small tasks that could be done while sitting, and gradually learned about the rhythms of ranch life. Garrett was often gone during the day, working with the horses or managing the ranch operations, but he made a point of checking on her each evening. Their conversation started out brief and awkward, but gradually became easier, more natural. He told her about the ranch, about the horses they bred and trained, about his dreams of expanding the operation. She talked about teaching, about her hopes for the school, about the books she loved and the places she wanted to someday see. He borrowed her copy of a poetry collection and returned it 3 days later with thoughtful questions about specific poems. She asked about horse training, and he explained with patience and enthusiasm, his whole face lighting up when he talked about the animals he clearly loved. Kate watched these interactions with an expression of quiet satisfaction. A week after the accident, Faith was able to hobble to the dining room for supper using a cane that Garrett had carved for her from a smooth piece of oak. Sitting at the table with them felt natural, like she belonged there, and that realization both thrilled and frightened her. "The school board sent word," Kate mentioned as they ate. "They would like you to come into town when you are able to see the schoolhouse and meet some of the students' families. Sarah has offered to host a small gathering at her home." "That would be wonderful," Faith said. "Do you think I could manage it in a few days? I am walking much better now. If the weather holds, I could drive you in the wagon on Saturday," Garrett offered. "It is a smooth ride and we could take it slow." "That would be perfect, thank you." Saturday arrived with clear blue skies and moderate temperatures. Garrett brought the wagon around, and with his help, Faith managed to climb up to the bench seat. Kate had insisted on coming along, and she sat in the back with a basket of preserves to deliver to various friends in town. The ride to Kingfisher took about 40 minutes, and Faith enjoyed every moment of it. Garrett pointed out landmarks, showed her the best spots along the creek, told her stories about growing up in this country. He was a good storyteller, with a dry sense of humor that made her laugh. The town itself was larger than Faith had expected, with a proper main street lined with businesses, several churches, a bank, and a 2-story hotel. The schoolhouse sat at the edge of town, a neat white building with a bell tower and a large yard for the children to play in. Garrett helped her down from the wagon and handed her the cane. "Take your time. There is no rush." The schoolhouse was bright and well-maintained, with rows of desks, a large blackboard, and shelves ready for books. Faith walked slowly through the space, imagining it full of children, already planning how she would arrange things. "It is perfect," she breathed. "The town takes pride in it," Kate said. "Education matters out here. We want our children to have opportunities." They spent an hour at the schoolhouse before heading to Sarah Matthews' home, a comfortable house near the church where Reverend Matthews presided. Several families were already there, curious to meet the new teacher who had survived such a dramatic introduction to their town. Faith found herself surrounded by friendly faces, answering questions about her background and her teaching experience. The children were shy at first but gradually warmed to her, especially when she produced a handful of hard candies from her pocket and distributed them with a smile. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Garrett standing near the wall, watching. His presence was comforting, steadying her when she felt overwhelmed by all the attention. An older man with an impressive white beard approached Garrett. "That was some fine horse work the other day, young Cooper. Your father would have been proud." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I've got a mare that has been giving my son trouble, refuses to take a saddle without a fight. You think you could take a look at her?" "I would be happy to. Bring her by the ranch next week." Faith noticed how many people sought Garrett out, asking his advice about horses, about cattle, about ranch matters. He was clearly respected in the community, trusted for his knowledge and his character. It made her see him in a new light, not just as the kind man who had rescued her, but as someone important to this town, someone others looked up to. As the afternoon wore on, Faith found herself growing tired. Her ankle was aching from more activity than she had managed in days. Kate noticed immediately. "Time to head home, I think. Faith needs to rest." Garrett had the wagon ready in minutes. The ride home was quieter than the morning journey, with Kate dozing in the back and Faith feeling pleasantly exhausted. The sun was setting, painting the prairie in shades of gold and orange. "You did well today," Garrett said quietly. The families liked you, the children too. I hope so. I want to do a good job for them. You will. You care about teaching, about the students. That matters more than anything else. They were almost back to the ranch when Garrett suddenly pulled the wagon to a stop. Faith looked at him questioningly. I want to show you something. If you are not too tired. What is it? You will see. It is not far and we can take it slow. He helped her down from the wagon and offered his arm for support. Kate waved them on. I will take the wagon back. Do not be too long. The light is fading. Garrett led Faith along a narrow path through the prairie grass, moving at a pace that accommodated her hobbling gait. They crested a small rise, and Faith gasped at the view spread before them. A small creek wound through a shallow valley, lined with cottonwood trees. The setting sun reflected off the water in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. Wildflowers dotted the grass in splashes of purple and yellow, and birds sang their evening songs from the trees. It is beautiful, Faith whispered. This is my favorite place on the whole ranch, Garrett said. I come here when I need to think. It is peaceful. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink lower. Then Garrett spoke again, his voice quiet but intent. Miss Sullivan, Faith, I need to say something. She looked up at him, her heart suddenly beating faster. In the golden light, his face looked almost vulnerable, uncertain in a way she had never seen before. I know we have only known each other a short time, he continued. And I know you came here for a teaching position, not looking for anything else. But I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel something when I am around you. From the moment I saw you sitting there in the dirt, hurt and scared but trying to be brave, something just shifted inside me. And this past week, getting to know you, talking with you, it has only gotten stronger. Faith's breath caught in her throat. Garrett, I am not asking you for anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. You are smart and kind and beautiful, and I think you are the bravest person I have ever met, coming all this way alone to start a new life. I admire that. I admire you. And if there is any chance, any possibility that you might feel something too, then I would like permission to court you properly. To see where this might lead. Faith felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. She thought about the past week, about how safe she felt with him, how easy it was to talk to him, how her heart jumped every time he walked into a room. She had told herself it was just gratitude, just the natural result of him saving her life. But it was more than that. So much more. I do feel something, she said softly. I have been trying not to, trying to be sensible and focus on why I came here. But every time you smile at me, every time we talk, I find myself wishing the conversation did not have to end. I have never felt this way before, and it frightens me a little. But in a good way. The smile that broke across his face was like the sunrise. You mean it? I do. Yes, Garrett Cooper, you have my permission to court me. I would like that very much. He took her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture so tender it made her shiver. I will do right by you, Faith. I promise you that. I know you will. They stood there as the sun completed its descent and the first stars began to appear, hands joined, hearts opening to the possibility of something wonderful. The next weeks passed in a golden haze of healing and growing affection. Faith's ankle improved steadily, and with it, her independence. She could walk unassisted now, though she still carried the cane Garrett had made for her, more as a keepsake than a necessity. Garrett courted her properly, exactly as he had promised. He brought her wildflowers picked from the prairie. He carved her a beautiful wooden box for her hair combs. They took walks in the evening when his work was done, talking about everything and nothing, learning each other's minds and hearts. Kate watched it all with maternal approval, making sure they were never completely alone together, but giving them enough privacy to talk freely. She told Faith stories about Garrett as a boy, showed her the ranch through a mother's loving eyes, and gradually began treating Faith less like a guest and more like a daughter. Finally, the day came when school was set to open. Faith was nervous as Garrett drove her into town that first morning. What if the children did not like her? What if she failed at this job she had traveled so far to take? "You will be wonderful," Garrett said firmly when she voiced these fears. "Those children are lucky to have you." He was right. From the moment she rang the school bell and watched the students file in, Faith knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The children ranged in age from 6 to 14, eager and curious and ready to learn. Some could barely read, while others were advanced beyond their years. It was a challenge, but it was a challenge she loved. Garrett picked her up each afternoon, and they would spend the ride back to the ranch talking about her day. He listened with genuine interest as she described the students, their progress, the small triumphs and frustrations of teaching. A month into the school year, Garrett showed up one evening with a serious expression. "I need to take a trip to Texas. There is a breeder down there who has a stallion I am interested in buying. I will be gone about 2 weeks." Faith tried to hide her disappointment. "That sounds like an important opportunity." "It is, but I hate to leave right now." His meaning was clear in his eyes. "I will still be here when you return," she promised. He took her hand. "I am counting on it. Ma will take care of you while I am gone. I am living here and teaching." "I am not an invalid anymore, Garrett Cooper. I think I can manage without you for 2 weeks." He smiled at her teasing tone, but there was something wistful in his expression. "I know you can manage. Doesn't mean I will not miss you every day I am gone. I will miss you too." He left the next morning before dawn. Faith told herself the empty feeling in her chest was silly, that 2 weeks would pass quickly. But the ranch felt different without his presence, quieter somehow, less alive. She threw herself into her teaching, preparing elaborate lessons and staying late at the schoolhouse to grade papers. Kate noticed, but said nothing, just made sure Faith ate proper meals and got enough rest. 10 days after Garrett left, Faith was walking home from school in the late afternoon when she heard shouting from the town square. She hurried as fast as she could toward the commotion and found a crowd gathered around 2 men who appeared to be in a heated argument. One was a rancher named McCready, a hard-faced man with a reputation for a quick temper. The other was a younger man Faith had not seen before, dressed in dusty traveling clothes with a gun belt strapped around his hips. "I am telling you that horse is mine," the stranger was saying, his hand hovering dangerously near his pistol. "Stolen from my father's ranch 6 months ago. I have been tracking it for weeks, and now I find it in your corral wearing your brand. I bought that mare fair and square from a trader passing through," McCready shot back. "I have got the bill of sale to prove it. You calling me a liar? I am calling that horse stolen property." The tension was thick enough to cut, and Faith could see several other men in the crowd with their hands on their weapons. This could turn deadly in seconds. Without thinking, Faith pushed forward through the crowd. "Excuse me, gentlemen. Perhaps I can help." Both men turned to stare at her. McCready's scowl deepened. "This is men's business, Miss Sullivan. You should go on home." "What I should do is try to prevent bloodshed in the middle of town where children play," Faith said calmly, though her heart was hammering. "Now, this gentleman says the horse was stolen. Do you have papers proving ownership?" The stranger blinked, clearly not expecting to be questioned by a schoolteacher. "My father has the breeding records back in Texas, but I know this mare. She has a white star on her forehead and a crooked left ear from getting caught in wire as a foal." "And Mr. McCready, you say you have a bill of sale from a trader named Carson, came through last spring." "Then here is what we do," Faith said, keeping her voice level and reasonable. We send a telegram to this gentleman's father in Texas, confirming the description of the missing horse. If it matches, then clearly the trader sold stolen property. Mr. McCready, you were an innocent buyer, but the horse should be returned to its rightful owner, and you should seek compensation from the trader if he can be found. Does that not seem fair?" Both men looked uncertain, the heat of anger cooling slightly in the face of her logical suggestion. Sheriff Donovan, who had been watching from the edge of the crowd, stepped forward. "That seems right reasonable to me, Miss Sullivan. What do you boys say?" "Better than shooting each other in the street." The stranger looked at Faith with new respect. "That would be acceptable, madam. I do not want trouble. I just want my father's horse back." McCready grumbled, but he nodded. "Fine. But if the descriptions do not match, the mare is mine and this boy leaves town." "Agreed," Sheriff Donovan said. "Come on down to my office and we will send that telegram. Miss Sullivan, thank you for your level head." As the crowd dispersed, several people stopped to thank Faith for her intervention. Sarah Matthews beamed at her. "That was very brave, dear, and very smart. Men get so caught up in their pride, sometimes they need a woman's wisdom to see sense." Faith was shaking slightly now that the danger had passed. She had just stepped into the middle of a potential gunfight without even thinking about it. What had she been thinking? But it had worked. No one had been hurt, and a fair solution had been found. Kate hugged her when she got home and heard the story. "You took a terrible risk, but I am proud of you. You have got courage, Faith Sullivan, and the good sense to go with it. That is a rare combination." That night, Faith sat on the porch watching the stars and wondering what Garrett would say when he heard about her adventure. Would he be proud? Worried? Angry that she had put herself at risk? She did not have to wonder long. Garrett arrived home 2 days later, a day earlier than expected. He rode in just as Faith was getting ready to leave for school, and the moment he saw her, he swung down from his horse and strode across the yard. "You are home early," she said, her heart leaping at the sight of him. "I heard about what happened in town. Ran into Sheriff Donovan in the last settlement before home. He told me how you stepped into the middle of an argument between 2 armed men. His tone was hard to read." Faith lifted her chin. "Someone had to do something before anyone got hurt. You could have been shot, but I was not. And neither was anyone else." They stared at each other for a long moment, and then Garrett did something unexpected. He closed the distance between them and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against his chest. "Do not ever scare me like that again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "When I heard what you did, all I could think about was getting home to make sure you were safe. I pushed Ranger harder than I should have. I could not stand the thought of anything happening to you." Faith melted into his embrace, her arms going around his waist. "I am sorry I worried you. But I am fine. Everything turned out well. The telegram confirmed the horse was stolen, so Mr. McCready returned her and the young man went home happy. No one was hurt and justice was served." "You are remarkable," Garrett said, pulling back just enough to look down at her face. "Brave and smart and so stubborn you drive me crazy, and I love you for all of it." The words hung in the air between them. Faith's breath caught as she processed what he had just said. "You love me." "With everything I have," he confirmed. "I knew it before I left, but I wanted to wait to be sure to give you more time. But Faith, I have been sure since the first week you were here. I love you. I love your courage and your kindness. I love how you care about those children. I love talking to you and being near you. I love everything about you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it anymore." Tears spilled down Faith's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. I think I have loved you since you carried me home and made me feel safe. You are the best man I have ever known, Garrett Cooper, and I love you so much it scares me." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "Don't be scared. I have got you. I will always have you if you will let me." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to everything." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Faith's first kiss, and it was perfect, there in the morning sunshine with the man she loved. A throat cleared behind them, and they broke apart to find Kate watching from the porch with a huge smile. "It is about time. I was beginning to think you two would dance around this forever. Now, Faith, you need to get to school. Garrett, you need to unsaddle your horse and get some rest. You look exhausted, and tonight we will have a proper family dinner to celebrate." They followed her instructions, but not before Garrett stole one more quick kiss and whispered, "I will ask you properly, soon, with a ring and everything, but I wanted you to know how I feel." "I know," Faith said, touching his cheek gently, "and I cannot wait." School that day passed in a blur. Faith could barely focus on her lessons, her mind constantly drifting back to Garrett's declaration and that kiss. The children noticed her distraction and giggled among themselves, clearly sensing something had changed with their teacher. When Garrett picked her up that afternoon, his eyes found hers immediately and held. The ride home felt charged with new energy, new possibility. They did not need to talk. Everything important had already been said. Dinner that evening was a celebration, with Kate preparing Garrett's favorite dishes and bringing out a bottle of wine that had been saved for a special occasion. They talked and laughed, and Faith felt something settle deep in her chest, a sense of rightness, of being home. After dinner, Garrett asked Faith to walk with him. They strolled toward the creek in the fading light, and Faith knew something important was about to happen. At the spot where he had first told her about his feelings, Garrett stopped and turned to face her. He took both her hands in his. "I told you this morning that I love you, and I meant every word, but I want to do this properly. Faith Sullivan, you have changed my life in the best possible way. You have brought light and laughter and love into this house and into my heart. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. I want to raise a family with you, grow old with you, build a life together. Will you marry me?" He pulled a ring from his pocket, a simple gold band with a small diamond that caught the last rays of sunlight. "It was my grandmother's. My father gave it to my mother when he proposed, and she saved it for me to give to the woman I chose to marry. She wants you to have it." Faith was crying again, but they were the happiest tears she had ever shed. "Yes, yes, Garrett, I will marry you. I want all of that too. A life with you, a family, everything." He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her again, and Faith thought her heart might burst from joy. They married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the church, with the whole town in attendance. Faith wore a dress of cream-colored silk that Kate had helped her sew, and Garrett wore his best suit, looking so handsome that Faith could barely breathe when she first saw him standing at the altar. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony, and Sarah Matthews cried happy tears through the whole thing. The students from Faith's class attended, scrubbed and dressed in their Sunday best, beaming at their teacher. When Garrett kissed his bride, the congregation erupted in applause and cheers. They were beloved in the community, this young couple who had found each other in such dramatic fashion, and everyone wanted to celebrate their happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and enough food to feed an army. There was music and dancing, and Faith felt like she was floating through a dream. She danced first with her new husband, then with various friends and neighbors, but her eyes kept finding Garrett across the crowd, and every time their gazes met, she felt that flutter of joy all over again. As the sun set and the party wound down, Garrett swept Faith up in his arms amid much laughter and carried her into the house, over the threshold of what was now their shared home. Kate had moved her things to a smaller room, giving the newlyweds the master bedroom. "Welcome home, Mrs. Cooper," Garrett said, setting Faith gently on her feet. "Mrs. Cooper," Faith repeated, testing the name. "I like the sound of that." "So do I. I love you, Faith." "I love you too, so much." Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered words and gentle discoveries. Garrett was patient and loving, and Faith felt safe and cherished in his arms. The next morning, Faith woke to find sunlight streaming through the window and Garrett propped on one elbow, watching her with a soft smile. "Good morning, wife." "Good morning, husband." It was perfect. Life settled into a new rhythm after the wedding. Faith continued teaching, though she now rode to and from school with Garrett most days, or sometimes borrowed the buggy when he was needed elsewhere on the ranch. She loved her work, loved watching her students learn and grow, loved being part of shaping young minds. At home, she helped Kate with the household tasks, learning to make butter and preserve vegetables, to cook on the big wood stove, to manage the dozens of tasks that kept a ranch running smoothly. Kate was a patient teacher, and the two women grew even closer, more like mother and daughter than mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. Garrett expanded the horse breeding operation, gaining a reputation across Oklahoma territory for producing quality animals with good temperaments. People came from miles around to buy horses trained by Garrett Cooper, knowing they were getting animals that could be trusted. Faith and Garrett grew closer with each passing day, learning the rhythms of marriage, the give and take of sharing a life. They had their disagreements, of course. Faith thought Garrett worked too hard sometimes, pushing himself until he was exhausted. Garrett worried about Faith pushing herself too much at school, especially as winter came on and some of the children arrived with coughs and sniffles. But their love only deepened. They talked through their problems, learned to compromise, discovered that loving someone meant sometimes putting their needs ahead of your own. Winter brought snow and cold, and Faith's classroom became harder to heat properly. Some days she dismissed school early when the temperature dropped too low. Other days, the children huddled close to the stove while she taught, their breath visible in the air. One particularly cold day in January, Faith arrived home to find Garrett in serious discussion with Kate in the kitchen. They both looked worried. "What is wrong?" Faith asked immediately, unwinding her scarf. "There is a bad storm coming," Garrett said. "Worse than anything we have seen this year. I can feel it in the air and the animals are restless. We need to prepare." He was right. The storm hit that night with howling winds and driving snow that quickly became a full blizzard. For 3 days, they were trapped in the house, unable to see more than a few feet through the white-out conditions. Garrett and the ranch hands took turns checking on the animals in the barn, but even that short trip was dangerous in the extreme cold. Faith huddled close to the fire, grateful for the warmth of the house and her family's safety. She thought about her students, prayed they were all safe in their own homes. When the storm finally cleared, the world was transformed. Snow drifted as high as the porch railings in some places, and the temperature stayed bitterly cold. Garrett and the hands spent days digging out, checking the stock, making sure nothing had been seriously damaged. School was canceled for a week until the roads could be cleared, and it was safe for the children to travel. When classes finally resumed, Faith was relieved to see all her students accounted for, though many had tales of frightening nights spent huddled around fireplaces while the storm raged outside. Spring came eventually, as it always did, bringing warmth and new life to the prairie. The ranch greened up beautifully, and Faith discovered new joy in watching the land transform. She also discovered, with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, that she was pregnant. Kate noticed before Faith worked up the courage to tell Garrett, noting Faith's tiredness and the mornings when she could barely face breakfast. One afternoon, Kate cornered her in the kitchen with a knowing smile. "How far along are you, dear?" Faith blushed. "How did you know?" "I was pregnant myself once, and I have seen enough expectant mothers to recognize the signs." "Does Garrett know?" "Not yet. I wanted to be sure. And I am a little frightened, I suppose." Kate hugged her warmly. "That is natural, but you have nothing to fear. You are strong and healthy, and you will have all the help you need. Now, when are you going to tell my son? He will be over the moon." Faith told him that evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. Her hands were shaking as she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Garrett, I have something to tell you. We are going to have a baby." His reaction was everything she could have hoped for. His eyes went wide with wonder, and then he was laughing and crying at the same time, pulling her into his arms and holding her close. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Oh, Faith, I love you so much. Are you well? Do you need anything? Should you still be teaching?" "I am fine," she assured him, laughing through her own tears. "And yes, I can still teach for a while yet. Women do not become invalids just because they are expecting." "I know, I want to take care of you, both of you. You already do. You take such good care of us." They sat together as the stars came out, talking about the future, about names and nurseries and all the changes a baby would bring. Faith felt overwhelmed with happiness, with gratitude for this life she had built, for this man who loved her so completely. Kate was delighted with the news, immediately beginning to plan for the baby's arrival. She pulled out a trunk of baby clothes saved from when Garrett was small, tiny gowns and blankets lovingly preserved. Together, Faith and Kate began preparing the small room next to the master bedroom as a nursery, washing the little clothes and making new blankets in soft colors. Faith continued teaching through the spring and into early summer, finally stopping when the school year ended, and her condition became too obvious to hide. The town was thrilled for the young couple, and Sarah Matthews hosted a party where the women of Kingfisher showered Faith with gifts for the baby. As summer heated up, Faith found the pregnancy more uncomfortable. Her back ached, and the heat made her swell. But Garrett was endlessly patient, rubbing her feet and back, making sure she stayed cool and comfortable. Kate hovered, making special foods to tempt Faith's appetite when the heat made her nauseous. In late August, as the prairie grass turned golden, Faith went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Kate stayed with her the entire time, coaching her through the contractions while Garrett paced the hallway outside, helpless and worried. Finally, in the early afternoon, a baby's cry filled the house. Kate emerged with a huge smile to tell Garrett he had a son. Faith was exhausted but radiant when Garrett entered the room to meet his child. The baby was tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and his father's nose. They named him Thomas Gabriel Cooper, after both their fathers. Garrett held his son with trembling hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect. You are perfect. Thank you, Faith. Thank you for this gift." "We made him together," Faith said softly, watching her husband cradle their child with such tender care. "Our little miracle." Thomas was a good baby, healthy and content. Faith recovered well from the birth, and within weeks she was back to her usual energy level, though now all her attention was focused on the tiny person who had so completely captured her heart. Garrett was a devoted father, rising in the night to walk with Thomas when he fussed, changing diapers without complaint, singing to his son in a surprisingly good voice. Faith would watch them together and feel her heart swell with love. When September came and school was set to start, Faith faced a difficult decision. She loved teaching, but she could not imagine leaving Thomas for entire days. After much discussion with Garrett and Kate, they came up with a solution. Kate would take over much of the ranch household management, and Faith would bring Thomas to school with her. It was unconventional, but the school board agreed, especially when several mothers pointed out that having a baby in the classroom would be educational for the older girls. So Faith returned to teaching with Thomas in a cradle near her desk. He slept through most of the lessons, and when he woke, one of the older students would rock him while Faith continued teaching. It worked beautifully, and Faith discovered she could manage both roles, mother and teacher, with support from her students and her family. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Thomas grew into a bright, curious toddler who loved horses just like his father. When he was 3, Faith became pregnant again, this time with a little girl they named Sarah Grace, after Sarah Matthews, and because Grace seemed the perfect word for what their life had become. Sarah was different from Thomas, more stubborn and independent, keeping them all on their toes. But she was loved just as fiercely, another precious addition to their family. Faith continued teaching until Sarah was born, then took a year off to focus on her 2 small children. But she missed the classroom, missed her students, and when Sarah turned 1, she returned part-time, teaching 3 days a week while Kate watched the children. Garrett's horse operation continued to thrive. He hired additional hands as the ranch grew, and they built a new barn and extended the corrals. The Cooper Ranch became known as one of the best in Oklahoma, and Garrett's reputation as a horseman spread far beyond Kingfisher. When Thomas turned 7, a dreadful illness swept through Kingfisher. Several children in Faith's class fell ill with scarlet fever, and despite Faith's best efforts to maintain cleanliness and quarantine sick students quickly, the disease spread. The school was closed and families huddled in their homes, terrified. Thomas and Sarah both caught it. For 2 weeks, Faith and Garrett barely slept, taking turns sitting with their feverish children, sponging them with cool water, forcing fluids, praying desperately. Kate prepared her strongest medicinal teas and Dr. Harrison visited daily. It was the worst time of their lives. Faith had never known such fear, watching her children burn with fever, hearing them cry in pain. Garrett held her when she broke down sobbing, his own face drawn with worry. Thomas recovered first, his fever breaking one night and leaving him weak but clearly on the mend. But Sarah's fever lingered, and for 3 terrible days they thought they might lose her. Faith sat by her daughter's bed, holding her tiny hand, whispering stories and prayers. "Please, please do not leave us. We love you so much. Please fight, sweetheart, please." And somehow, miraculously, Sarah fought. Her fever broke on the 4th day, and though she was dangerously thin and weak, she began to recover. The relief was overwhelming. Garrett and Faith held each other and their children and cried together, grateful beyond words that their family was still whole. But not every family in Kingfisher was so fortunate. 3 children died from the fever, and the whole town grieved. Faith attended the funerals with a heavy heart, knowing how close she had come to standing in those grieving parents' places. The illness changed something in Faith and Garrett. They had always known their happiness was precious, but now they understood how fragile it was, how quickly it could be lost. They held their children tighter, said, "I love you" more often, treasured every ordinary moment. As the children grew, the ranch grew with them. Thomas showed his father's gift with horses, spending every spare moment in the barn or corrals, learning from Garrett. Sarah, true to her independent nature, was more interested in the ranch's business side, following Kate around and learning to keep accounts and manage supplies. When Faith was 35, she became pregnant for the 3rd and final time. It was unexpected, as Sarah was already 10, but welcomed with joy. They had a second son whom they named James Matthew, and he brought new energy to the household. James was a sweet-natured child, happy and easy-going, beloved by his older siblings who doted on him. By the time he was born, Thomas was helping his father train horses, and Sarah was teaching Faith's classroom 3 days a week while Faith stayed home with the baby. The family grew and changed, but the love at its core remained constant. Faith and Garrett's marriage deepened with time, weathering challenges and celebrating triumphs together. They disagreed sometimes, had arguments that needed resolution, faced difficulties like any couple. But they always came back to love, to the commitment they had made to each other on that autumn day 20 years earlier. Kate lived to see all 3 of her grandchildren grow into young adults. She passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 78, with Garrett and Faith sitting beside her bed. Her funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Oklahoma, a testament to how beloved she had been. Faith grieved for the woman who had been more than a mother-in-law, who had been a true mother to her. But she was grateful, too, for all the years they had had, for all the wisdom Kate had shared, for the love she had given so freely. Thomas married at 23, bringing home a rancher's daughter named Elizabeth who fit seamlessly into the family. They built a house on the far side of the ranch property and began raising horses of their own, working in partnership with Garrett. Sarah, true to her independent spirit, went to college, one of the first women from Kingfisher to do so. She studied law and returned home to hang out her shingle, becoming the first female attorney in the county. She married a newspaper editor named Charles when she was 28, and together they worked to bring progressive ideas to Oklahoma. James followed his mother's path into education, training as a teacher, and eventually taking over as headmaster of the Kingfisher School. He married his college sweetheart, a quiet woman named Rachel who taught music. As grandchildren began to arrive, Faith and Garrett found new joy in the next generation. They watched Thomas and Elizabeth's 3 children grow up on horses just like their father and grandfather. They delighted in Sarah's fierce little daughter, who already wanted to be a lawyer like her mother. They attended James's twin boys' school programs and sporting events. Faith retired from teaching when she turned 55, passing the torch to the next generation. She had taught in Kingfisher for more than 30 years, shaping the minds of hundreds of children, many of whom now brought their own children to the school. Garrett began to slow down too, letting Thomas take on more of the ranch operations, though he still worked with the horses he loved. His hair had gone silver, and his face was lined with years of sun and wind, but Faith thought he was more handsome than ever. They grew old together, watching the world change around them. Oklahoma became a state in 1907, and they celebrated with the rest of the territory turned state. Automobiles appeared on the streets of Kingfisher, though Garrett maintained that horses were more reliable. The Great War came and went, though thankfully none of their children or grandchildren were called to serve. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party at the ranch. The barn was decorated with lanterns and flowers, and it seemed like the whole county turned out to celebrate. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and tears, and dancing late into the night. Faith danced with her husband under the stars, just like they had on their wedding day, and felt the same flutter of joy she had felt then. 40 years, Garrett murmured. Best 40 years of my life. Mine too. I love you, Garrett Cooper. Just as much now as I did when you carried me home that first day. You were covered in dust and trying so hard to be brave. I fell for you right then, I think. The moment I saw you, my hero, still my hero after all these years. And you are still my miracle. the woman who fell out of a stagecoach and into my life and changed everything for the better. They kissed, surrounded by their family, their friends, their life's work made manifest in children and grandchildren, and the thriving ranch and community they had helped build. As the celebration wound down and the guests began to leave, Faith stood on the porch of the house she had first entered as an injured stranger all those years ago. Garrett came to stand beside her, his arm going around her waist in the familiar gesture that never failed to make her feel cherished. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible. When I got on that stagecoach in Kansas 40 years ago, I never imagined this, any of this. I thought I was just going to teach school. Instead, you found a home, a family, a whole life." "I found love," Faith corrected. "Everything else grew from that. From us." They stood together as the last wagon rolled away down the drive, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The prairie stretched around them, familiar and beloved, marked by decades of memory and love. Inside, they could hear their children cleaning up, their grandchildren running through the house in a final burst of energy before bed. This house that had once belonged to Kate and Garrett's father, that Faith had been carried into as a stranger, was now filled with multiple generations of love and life. Faith thought about that day 40 years ago, how one moment had changed everything. If the stagecoach wheel had not hit that gopher hole, if she had not been thrown from the coach, if Garrett had not been riding that road at precisely that moment, their lives would have been completely different. But fate, or providence, or simple chance had brought them together. A stagecoach had thrown her into the dirt at full speed, and a cowboy had caught the horses and carried her home. And in doing so, he had given her everything she never knew she needed: love and family and belonging. Purpose and partnership, and a home that was more than just a place. It was a feeling of rightness that had never faded in 40 years. "Come to bed," Garrett said softly. "It has been a long day." Faith let him lead her inside, through the house they had filled with love, to the bedroom they had shared for 4 decades. They prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of long marriage, and when they lay down together, Faith curled into Garrett's side just as she had done thousands of times before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too. Always have, always will." Faith closed her eyes, her husband's heart beat steady beneath her ear, and smiled. She thought of the young woman she had been, frightened and alone on a dusty Oklahoma road, not knowing that the best part of her life was about to begin. And she thought of the life they had built, brick by brick, choice by choice, love upon love. The children they had raised, the students she had taught, the community they had served. The ranch that thrived under their care, the horses that carried the Cooper name with pride, the grandchildren who would carry their legacy forward. It was a good life, a beautiful life, a life worth every moment of the journey. Outside, the Oklahoma night was peaceful, the same stars shining down on the same prairie that had witnessed a young cowboy save a young woman all those years ago. The ranch was quiet, the horses settled in their barn, the cattle grazing in distant pastures. And in the house, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived, Faith Sullivan Cooper drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, grateful for every moment of their 40 years together, and looking forward to however many more years they might be blessed with. Their love story had begun with a dramatic accident and a daring rescue, but it had grown into something far more precious than any storybook romance. It had become a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration, a friendship that deepened with every shared sunrise, a love that had weathered storms and celebrated joys and emerged stronger with each passing year. Faith had found everything she had been looking for and so much more that she had not even known to hope for. And it had all started with a moment of chaos and fear that had led her straight into the arms of the man who would become her whole world. The stagecoach had thrown her into the dirt, but Garrett Cooper had carried her home. And home, she had discovered, was not a place but a person, a feeling, a life built together one day at a time with love and commitment and unwavering faith in each other. As Faith surrendered to sleep, her last conscious thought was simple gratitude. Thank you, she thought, whether to fate or providence or the universe itself. Thank you for that day. Thank you for him. Thank you for this beautiful, imperfect, wonderful life. And in the morning, she would wake beside her husband, and they would begin another day together, still in love after 40 years, still grateful for the accident of fate that had brought them together, still building their life one moment at a time. Because that was what love was, not just the dramatic moments of rescue and declaration, but the quiet accumulation of ordinary days lived side by side. The morning coffee shared in comfortable silence, the hands held while watching the sunset, the soft goodnight kisses after 40 years that still made her heart flutter. Faith and Garrett Cooper had found their happy ending, but more importantly, they had found their happy every day, their happy always, their forever. And that was the most beautiful love story of all.